My dog out.
Okay. All right. So when you do
Sorry,
that,
buddy.
hey everyone, how's so we're here to talk a little bit about OpenRocket 2202, what's new, an introduction, and all the new features in the 2202 release and all that kind of fun stuff. So it should be good fun. Just before we get started, we want to kind of like remind the audience that if you have some different questions for us, please use the Q&A tab. We'll be monitoring the Q&A portions. We will not be monitoring the chat or other places like that, mostly just focusing on the Q&A. It helps us kind of really stay focused on what the if you do have the question, please send it over there. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So just in case, when we started this presentation and we got the scheduling, we noticed that Jim Barrowman was scheduled for the exact same time. So
The
he,
founder of our the whole aerodynamics of rocketry, hobby
that's right.
rocketry.
So it would be fantastic if you were looking for him and you wanted to actually watch that. What do you think, Joe? You think like people should
Oh,
watch that?
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So if you wanted to pop
It's
and check that out, we would not blame you at all. So if you're looking for Jim, you are in the wrong room at this moment in time. Um, so let's see. Just in case, we'll do some introductions here. So to start out with, that is not Jim Barrowman, and either. So who are we? So uh, this is Joe Pfeiffer. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Joe Pfeiffer. I am in Las Cruces, New Mexico, member of the Flare or club. We will be helping host NARAM later in the summer. I've been involved with OpenRocket since 2018 as a contributor.
Awesome.
And Billy?
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, Billy Olsen. I am out of Sarah down here in Tucson. I have been working as an OpenRocket contributor since 2020. I have learned a lot from Joe along the way and have lots to thank him for. Uh,
I
and
can't
it's just a
imagine
great
what.
community to work with. So, what was that, Joe? Sorry.
I said I can't imagine what.
Oh, tons of stuff. Come on, man. So, okay, so let's give us a kind of little preview of kind of what we're going to be talking about today, so you get an idea. So, we think it's all source is to honor kind of like the origins of things, make sure that everyone has a good understanding of what's going on. So we're going to talk a little bit about the history of OpenRocket, kind of where it came from, what's been going on in it, kind of where it's been going. We're going to take a look at the new features that have been coming around, which is fantastic. Lots of different work there. It's been 8 years since the release, so goodness, there's got to be some various features in there that we've got to actually look for. And then, of course, proof is in the pudding. So let's walk through some of those demos and actually see kind of like what those features look like, how they play with. Now, we won't get to go through everything, but we'll get to go through some really fun stuff as we're going there. And then, it's always nice to give you an idea of what we think of the direction that we're going in now. There's lots of ideas that we're going after. Um, and so we just kind of want to stop, take a look forward, and kind of let you get an idea of what we're thinking. Of course, we always look for feedback from you as well. So and then, let's close it out. It is open source. It is community. One of the great things about open source is the fact that it's a nice community of people to actually collaborate, much like when, I already said I've learned a lot from Joe along the way. And when you go to your club chapters and all that, you help out other individuals and they help you. It's a community. It is a different type of open source. It's the same type of open source. So how can you get involved in OpenRocket and kind of move on from there? So anything you want to add to this, Joe?
That sounds good. I guess one thing I want to mention is that we'll be giving demos. We'll be talking about new features. We also want to cover some sort of pitfalls people run into on a regular basis, and talk about some of the questions that we see a lot of on the Rocketry forum and the Facebook group.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks for So I kind of forgot about mentioning that. So thanks. Okay, so let's history of OpenRocket. So before I start, I'm going to just put out a broad apology here, and this is for myself and for Joe. Um, we respect the different people here, but we don't necessarily. We will possibly mispronounce names. We often refer to each other as nicknames and handles on instant messaging or in pull requests in GitHub and things like that, and or you write it down and you don't necessarily pronounce it regularly, and so one of the things that we'd like to actually take a look at is as an apology of like if we mispronounce your name, it's not intentional. Um, so look,
A lot of these names, even names of people in the project, we have never actually heard pronounced. We've only seen them read. Uh, One promise I think I can make is we will do nothing worse to your name than I have heard done to mine.
that's right. Pfeiffer, right? Is that what it is?
Pfeiffer,
So,
Pfeiffer,
Pfeiffer,
Pfeiffer.
there you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, whatever it happens to be. Uh, so starting back in 2009, if you actually take a look, that Sampo Niskanen Justila actually contributed the OpenRocket source code to the overall community. He uploaded it to SourceForge, um, and it made it available for the world, for us to actually take part in and go from there. He worked on that. It was part of his master's research thesis, and it reached a 1.0.0 status in April of 2010. Um, and it migrated. SourceForge was the place where open source software was at one point in time, and some of it still is, and it's still an interesting place. But GitHub's kind of the new hotness, and so it migrated over into the GitHub space. And there's some advantages of using GitHub as far as like attracting different developers, ease of workflow. It's tied into it with people's different work.
mhm,
A lot of businesses and stuff use it as well. And so at that point in time, it migrated over to the GitHub space. It changed the versioning format from a 1.0 to more of like a year dot month type format, starting with the 12.03 release. So that would be,
sounds right.
2012 March. Yep. And at that point in time, there was a fairly robust community of members that were actually maintaining it. And I want to call out a few of them, just some of the different people that are working on it between 2012 and 2015. And these are kind of people that have contributed to the project that have more than 75 commits in the history. So there was Mr. Kevin Ruland, there was Sampo himself, Bill Cooker, and then especially leading up into 2015 and to carry 2015 forward, that it began the development of pods, and a man by the name of Dan Williams. A lot of credit goes out to him. He really significantly undertook a lot of the effort to actually introduce pods and change a lot of the internal structures of the OpenRocket program itself. Joe, anything to add about that particular part of kind of going up into there and the history up to that point?
Yeah, and I think talking about pods just a minute is worthwhile. The it sounds like easy, right? Just add something over on the side of the rocket, and it turns out that the assumption that a rocket has a central core and that's it was buried very deeply in the code. It was everywhere in the code. Adding pods was just a huge effort and huge rewrite. There was probably more code added to be able to add pods than existed in OpenRocket before that. And that's why it's taken 8 years.
It was right a rewrite of some of the core pieces there, plus like
Right.
understanding the different changes in the physics and how different things affect it overall. So that it wasn't just purely just simple, right?
Right.
It was a
It may
complicated
be a
project.
bag on the side of the rocket, but it was not a bag on the side of the code.
That's right. That's so so there was a lot of work that went into that. It was a lot of effort. A lot of the developers kind of holding the product project up and propping it. We saw a couple contributors come in, and then Joe was one of the people that really popped in to start helping that up. Thank you so much, Joe. And really, there were other members of the community that we want to call out as well, as we were pushing towards this, and it would not have happened to get to where we're actually at last year. Last February, we released a beta release, like an actual beta release out for everyone, and then there's been a steady stream of people pushing it to where we just released an RC1 this week, which has been fantastic. And my hats off, and a huge thank you to four members I really want to call out, that without them it would not have lifted up and gotten to where it's at. So I want to thank Neil Weinstock and H. Craig Miller. Both of you have been fantastic. Neil has a very strong passion about moving it forward, and Craig has been really pushing together to try and analyze all the different questions. Craig has served as kind of like the release lead and release manager. Neil has been one that's like just really been pushing and questioning everything and being encouraging, being an active tester, giving strong feedback around UI updates and paper cuts and how things should work versus how things do work. And two people who have just really rocked it off on actually contributing code. Joe, it's been fantastic of you stepping in and helping close out the door on a lot of different pieces there. And then, of course, Sibo Van Gool. Sorry, Sibo, if I mispronounced your name, but Sibo, he's really deserves a lot of credit for just how far he's taken the user experience. He and Neil together have really been working so hard, and a lot of the paper cuts on the user experience and the UI, they really belong to a lot of credit to Sibo.
Uh,
Joe, like I
yeah,
know that it's yeah.
the SIBO, I'm convinced he doesn't sleep. I sometimes think there is not just one SIBO; that he's like this programming team,
Yeah,
off in Belgium. He is in Belgium, right?
yeah, I believe so.
Um,
Yeah.
but he contributes as much in the average week as I have contributed total. Can't say enough about him, and can't thank him enough.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Seriously, thank you. So, okay. So we also have an interesting graphic just to kind of show like the nice thing about OpenRocket, it's an open source software and it is used all around the world. So here's a nice graphic picture of kind of like which territories and countries it's used in around the world. It's in 89 that we have measured. Not all of our downloads actually allow us to actually determine where this is done. This is based on geo IP locations, but I thought it was a very interesting part is that when you take a look at that, you can almost see the entire Earth in that particular drawing right there. So I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that sort of amazes me that it is that widespread.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. What about new features, Joe? I these new features. So why don't you take us through some of these?
Well, okay, so the first one is pods. Pods is the big one. Um, the amount of work that went into that we've already mentioned. It gives a great deal more flexibility in how you can design a rocket. Close related to pods are drop-off boosters, so you can have, you can simulate something like this Falcon Heavy, uh, rail buttons, tube fins. Uh, we can attach fins to transitions now, so you can do a V2. Uh, Somebody else who really needs a shout out is Dave Cook. He has started maintaining a database of parts with manufacturers, much more accurate than has existed in OpenRocket before. And he has kindly allowed us to bundle his component database with our product. Um, what else? That is probably the big ones. Oh, I should mention that on platforms that support it, you can click on an icon that represents a .ork file, and it will open Rocket, something that Windows users and Mac users really expect.
That's a really nice
Um,
experience. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, oh, and I guess one other thing to mention here is there's a professional quality installer that can install OpenRocket for you, uh, and we've got code signing. So uh, your antivirus program on Windows will no longer tell you that you may be installing ransomware, which one of the installers warned people about with OpenRocket.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's huge. But that's also we need to give a shout out and a thanks to those install for J
yeah,
who've helped donate the licenses to help us actually be able to deliver that to you as an open source project. They've helped actually bring that along by contributing the licenses for us to be able to do that. So
yeah, yeah. The company is EJ Technologies, and we are very grateful to them. One other good thing about the installer is that a long-standing problem has been that you need this antique version of Java on your system to run OpenRocket. You don't need that anymore. We bundle a working version of Java with OpenRocket. And so what Java you've got on your system, you don't even have to worry about it. It's just you don't need to have a Java on your system because there will be one in OpenRocket if you use our installer.
and that's great because that really helps with a lot of paper cuts and things like that that we've seen. We still have the option for those of you who are power users to just download the jar file and go from that experience. But for a lot of the simple setup and go forth like that, just makes it so much easier for people, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think let's
Oops.
let's head on to pods and side boosters.
Yeah. So
Well,
I think this is This is an interesting thing to talk about. You were going to say something. I cut you right off there, Joe. My apologies.
No, I was just sort of heading on to um, turn it over to you.
Okay, you're going to turn it over to me. All right. So I think the fun thing is talked a little bit about what they were, and seeing different things. And what we want to do is take you through a demo to kind of show you a series of demos to kind of show you what we're looking at here. So um, I'm going to stop sharing this particular presentation and actually jump over and share a different portion of my screen here. Let's see, get my screen, go on that side. Okay, can you see me there, Joe?
Yes. More
Okay.
importantly, I can see OpenRocket there.
Oh, okay. It's now on stage too, so I think everyone else can actually see it out there as well. Um,
Yeah.
and so what this is the new, for people who haven't seen it. It looks very, very similar, but if we come in here, there's been some adjustments to the ordering of the layout of these buttons for different components. There's a whole new icon set, so if you wanted to actually look in at the different details, I know that Neil spent a lot of time running through what the icon should look like, getting them updated. I know Sibo also participated in getting that. And so if you take a look, there's just new icons throughout that make it really nice and just looks really professional here. Um, and one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start by going through the example rockets here. And what we're going to do is we're going to build a pods on a body tube type thing. And so,
There is one thing that we should mention while we're at this point, which
yep.
is that we go ahead and open that up again.
Oh, yep.
We have gone through the examples. We have tried to get rid of the ones or fix the ones that really wouldn't have flown. We've reorganized them and we've tried to give them better, more coherent names. Question we see a lot of is, well, how can I do a two-stage rocket? Well, we've got an example for you.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah,
really good point, Joe.
if we wanted to, we could just bring up the pod example and say, here's pods, but we're not going to. We're going to start with a simple rocket and add pods to it.
Yeah, we want to show you how to construct it and start from there.
Yeah,
Point. And so and thanks for calling that out, because I do know that there was a lot of effort put in here, especially around some different things around presets and simulation extensions, and
yeah,
just breaking it down into categorizations of simply essentially these are fairly simple rockets, these are more advanced scenarios, and these are even yet more advanced scenarios. So if you actually take a look at the layout and the structuring of them, it helps you get an idea of how far you would look, and it groups them in complexity type stuff.
yeah.
So okay, so I'm going to start with a simple model rocket here. And as when we open up any new rocket, this one, if it's created, we get the nice information about it if you store that. And what we're going to do here is we're basically going to start with this simple rocket, and we're going to switch. We now have a new top view, side view, back view, whereas before view and a back view. So that was something that was interesting, that if you want, not very many people understood that you could rotate actually what it looks like here and see an actual rotation. And so we've made it a little easier to just go top to side. We're going to take a look at the back view as part of this, though. What we want to do is we can actually show, if we select, like, here's the body tube, and we want to add pods. And so pods, it's going to be kind of interesting as we go. So it's going to be a little bit difficult to see, perhaps. But if we look at pods here, we want to start here and we want to add 3 of them. And we want to have an angle of 60 degrees. I think that actually we want them right here in line with these particular pieces. But if I wanted to rotate it around, I could show what this actually looks like. And I'm going to zoom in just a bit so everyone can see this. So if you see here, these are an indicator. These are nice indicators that were added as a usability experience to kind of see exactly where pods are going to join onto the body tube. And so you can see that as I start to rotate that and play around with it, you can see that it's actually moving those locations around the tube, so you can see exactly where it gets connected. So we're going to start here on particular case. And so you can see that that's exactly where they are. I'm going to zoom back out to fit, so it's easier to see some of the bigger picture stuff here. And then we are going to add a body tube. And so we've got our pod set, and we said, no, I didn't walk through that dialogue well enough. So what I wanted to do is basically say, there's 3. So the pod set kind of describes, I want to add different pieces of pods to the overall rocket tube here. So this is going to kind of indicate these are places I'm going to join this onto the rocket. How many do I want? Do I have two actual pods that are connecting to it? Do I have 3 pods or 4 pods? In this case, we're going to do a 3-pod example. We're going to line these up with the fins, and you're going to kind of see where we're actually going to go with some of the fin behavior. Um, kind of like of where you want to do the radius for some of these, you can do it relative to the surface of the parent component or to the center of the parent component. So if you wanted to talk about how far away it actually is, it's relative to either the center of the body tube here or the edges of the body tube in this particular case. And so you can kind of see what some of those pieces zooming in, or as you can kind of play with it to how far and how close do I want it to actually be considered for putting these pods in. So just to kind of start out, I'm going to go back here, sorry. I'm going to go back to 60 degrees just to kind of show where these are at, and so it's easier for people to see. I'm going to add a body tube. And when I add a body tube, one thing you'll notice is that the preset component dialog comes up. So this is a way that you can actually check a list of manufactured preset components that come from that library that Joe was talking about, the Dave Cook's library, or even if you want to see kind of like existing data that was in our old database for our parts database, you can actually get that by clicking on the show legacy database, and you can see what that data rocket, or you were depending on something from there. We by default go to Dave Cook's new rocket database, so you'll see most of the information coming from here. And just like before, you can do a search on the different that you actually want, or the different manufacturers, the different text. So you just start typing in here, and you can see what you're looking for. So in this case, I'm going to add a BT5, and on the left, if I click this check mark, that's going to add it to a preset so I can select it. And I can avoid opening this new dialog each and every single time that I come in here by just kind of checking this box or unchecking this box. By default, we're always going to open it, but I'm going to disable that for now. And I'm going to add the BT5 to my component tree so that I can actually get a quick selection access there. So in that checkbox, I can see that it's dropped down in here, and I can select it from this particular piece. So you can get the drop down and see that that's exactly where the part is that I did it. I'm going to make this 2 inches long, and we can kind of show the side view here. You can see that I've got 2-inch tubes, and if I want to look at it into a 3D finished view, takes a second, but you can see this is what they look like here. Joe, did you have something you were going to say?
Yeah, there are a couple things to mention here, and
Okay.
one of them is you'll notice in the lower right corner there's a warning saying that you've got a tube there with an open forward end. There's one of the things that sort of surprises people is that we really don't have a general purpose geometry engine. OpenRocket believes what you tell it about what a component is. So to you and me, this looks like a tube, and you could use it as a tube fin, and air would flow through it. Because it's a body tube, OpenRocket assumes that all the airflow is going around on the outside of it. Uh, so if you were to do this, expecting it to act like a tube fin, it would not simulate right. If you want tube fins, well, we have tube fins now.
We do.
But
Yes, I do.
so that's why you get warnings like that, trying to tell you about things that uh, we know are not going to work if you try to simulate them.
Yes, really good point. And I think that there's a lot of things that you can do, to your point on the geometry engine and stuff. There's a lot of things you can do to make it look really nice and look really pretty, the rockets, but you need to take it with a grain of salt. If we know that there's some things that aren't going to work, we do try and warn you that we don't necessarily have ways of modeling that or otherwise. But people have different ways of making a rocket look really pretty, but the simulation results just aren't going to match, and people should be quite aware of that, or aren't
Yeah.
going to be really valid, and people should be quite aware of that. So. Okay, so I'm going to keep moving along here. And as part of this, I'm going to take a look at the nose cone. So I've got this body tube here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a nose cone. And I'm just going to go right here and add a nose cone into there. Whoa, that's pretty big, right? It does default to something that's a little bit bigger. And in this case, I'm going to add a BNC5AX. If I had added it before in the right before, or it tries to match different. There's when you try and add components, it will try and match fore and aft type diameters. In this case, it's not going to do that. But I'm going to go ahead and add this here, so you can see the nose cone. So I've got that, and I move it up here so I can see that I've got of the tubes here. And if I do just, I can duplicate this cone to have two cones here. And I want that to be a tail cone in this particular case. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to flip it. So we've got a nice addition here. So I want to turn that from a nose cone to a tail cone, so you can create some of these sci-fi rocket type things with the pods. Kind of shifted forward at this point. It looks fine from the rear. So if I was to look at the back, it looks just kind of normal here. But if I look from that 3D figures section that I was showing, you can see that everything's shifted forward in that. And that's based upon the pod set. So it's adjusting around the different locations based upon adding the different components. And so what we want to do here is we want to just kind of move it back. It's back to about, oh, I don't know, like more like around there. Is that about right? So that looks like that's about the edge of the tips of these. We'll start with a 0 angle. So we'll go line up with the fins here. And so we kind of look at where they're now in the middle. And then I'm going to kind of like move it out from this perspective to say, let's see if we can't get it lined up with the tip of. Yeah.
Let's go back just one step to where you had the pods up against the body tube,
Yeah.
and this provides another example of where we don't have a general purpose geometry engine. Those fins are going right through the middle of those tubes, and this time we're not giving you a warning because OpenRocket has no idea there's anything wrong there. So the things we can spot, we do, uh, but you need to pay attention to whether your design makes sense as well.
Yes. That's a good point, Joe. Like you have to really think, don't you?
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Well, we were in the process of turning this into a, sci-fi type rocket with the pods here, and so just moved it out. And so setting that radial, you can see what this is doing. If I show you from the back view, this is moving it further away and closer to the actual body tube. So it's the radial distance away from the surface of in this particular example. So we wanted to nestle it up right against there. So one of Neil Weinstock's favorite designs of using pods in different places and stuff like that. You might use it in things like this.
right.
So um, there we go. So we can see what that actually looks like. And if you wanted to, um, now we just added some different things and they look like they are, and it looks okay, but we want to paint them because we are good like that. And actually what we like to paint, we like to actually have nice pretty colored things. And so what I want all of these tubes to be the same color here. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select all of them that I want. This is an addition that's here as well. In this particular release is having a multi-select and edit. And so if you select different items and different components here, you're going to be able to see the common features across these particular items within the rocket, or across these components, so that you can say, oh, I want to adjust the appearance of all these, or I want to change the length of them if they have something in common here. So one of the great examples is I want to set the surface finish across the entire outside of my rocket or something like that, right, Joe? But I can then change what the actual appearance looks like that. I can say, oh, we want them all white. So, and you can just see like that is we've changed the color and everything's the same color. So that was nice and easy. And
Yeah,
if we wanted to, we could go straight to the body tubes and we could add, you know, we could change the actual texture that's on here or whatever we wanted to actually do. But yeah,
yeah,
so yeah, and so from here, what if we didn't want just the pod type scenario? What if we wanted to do something slightly different? What if we want to change them to finlets, right, Joe?
right.
Let's say, I'm sorry.
I said right.
Yeah. doing like the I think the T-lock type design, right? So that's a favorite design of many people where you've got like those nice tip fins that you actually want. So let's turn that. Let's do that with this particular rocket. We can say that our pod set is going to be back to 0. So we're basically moving here, getting this back into normal, and we're going to turn these body tubes into the phantom body tube. And so by changing it to a 0 outside diameter, the body tube still the infamous phantom body tube, which allows us to start adjusting things and adding new fins and different configurations and such. And I think one of the things to note is that while you can do a lot of different things for the design here, again, it's not a geometry engine, so you don't get like fin interference or anything like that. If you start getting some crazy examples of how the fins are going to interfere with each other, we're not going to be able to show that or simulate that in various conditions. But if I did want to do that, I add fins here. Let's see, where's my fins? I want 2 fins. You can see that they're added here, but they're added in line because we think it's a regular, because of the angles, we think it's the regular in line with the rest of the fins. But we're going to rotate them 90 degrees. So you can see now that they're kind of perpendicular to the fins that are sticking out. And we want to, let's see, we want the root cord, let's say that's 2 inches. Tip cord is 1.75 inches. Slide it back just a little bit. And the way you would slide it back is you could take the whole pod set and slide that back just as we had done before. So you could move that back this way, put it 1 inch back. And that's kind of what it would look like. Of course, you can flatten these out, get the right shape that you're actually looking for. But what we do have here are is that T-lock style fin of where you've got them perpendicular at the ends there. And of course, I think it's always fun to play with the appearance. And some of the appearance stuff that we have is we can add different tail stripes or different colorings to it. So you can use, this is where you would actually do the textures and adding different appearances and making it really interesting. So if you wanted to add your own decals and things like that, this will list all of the decals that are currently loaded in that particular rocket that you can use, or you can then from a file and you can load it and find out which particular image you've created that you want to import as a decal and show on the surface of the rocket. Um, uh, and I think that's pretty much the end of this particular this particular demo. So I'm going to go ahead and hit stop sharing. And I think Joe, you had a demo you wanted to walk us through.
Yeah, this is another example of something people use pods for that frankly surprised me completely. I had no idea that this was going to work. Let me bring my copy of OpenRocket up. Um, let's see. There we go. And we're starting over again with the simple model rocket again. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a gap in the airframe and use pods to do that. So we're going to start with the nose cone and we're going to add a body tube after it. And let's try to make that, I don't know, a reasonable length, um, like, yeah, 6 inches. And then we're going to put a pod on that body tube. And what we're going to do here is we'll just have a single pod. We'll have it at the center of the parent component, offset of 0 from there. Hit it, and you can see the pod has been added to the um, structure, but you really can't see anything going on. We'll take our previous body tube and we'll come up here and we'll do a cut and paste. And let's go back and remember where we wanted to put the uh, pod set. And of course, this looks uh, like it did before. And um, okay, and I have I'm trying to remember what my plan here was. Um, we can take that pod set and we can just move it back until we've opened up a gap between our original body tube. Our original body tube is back here and our top body tube. Again, OpenRocket notices that this back body tube is open and that the aerodynamics here will not make sense. It also structurally won't make sense, but again, that's something OpenRocket can't determine. Let's go ahead and take this body tube and proportion things a little better and make it a little shorter. And again, we get into things that OpenRocket can't really figure out, which is that our wadding. Here, let's take a look at this in the 3D view again. Our wadding is hanging out the back of the rocket. And if we were doing this for real, we'd want to modify, uh, you'd probably put those internal components up in the top body tube. Um,
And
yeah.
Joe, one thing I think with the way that you're sharing your window, because you're just sharing the window, we actually can't see the menu drop downs or the other dialogues that are popping up for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Let's
I think you have to share
revise
the
that.
entire desktop part that or the entire.
Okay. Let's see
There we go.
here. Okay. Now we're seeing. Sorry about that. Um, of course, if we were really doing some sort of science fiction rocket here, we'd put some kind of structure in here. So we'd do something like, um, we'll go back up to this body tube and maybe add an inner tube to it. And rather than using something uh, canned, we'll just set the diameter we want, and let's make a cluster out of it. So that'll look spiffy, and then we can just move it back, and let's make it a little bit longer. And you can see what it looks like.
Yeah.
Again, back to the I want to hammer on this point of the geometry engine, or lack of geometry engine, since people will assume that a rocket will simulate the way it looks. When you tell it that a component is an inner component, like an inner body tube, OpenRocket believes you. So far as OpenRocket is concerned, these tubes here have no aerodynamics and will have no impact on your simulation. You'll get a warning about it down here, a warning about this gap in the rocket airframe, um, telling you that, yeah, this is not going to simulate well. We have a number of users who produce really nice looking renderings of rockets, and confuse those renderings with simulations. And we want to be clear that no, that's not a sim. That's a rendering. Okay, let's see. Uh, I think that was all we want to talk about with the airframe gap. I think Billy, you were going to talk
Yeah.
about side boosters next. So let me
Yes.
stop sharing.
Okay, and I'll share mine. And then I think one of the I'm going to share. I'm going to go a little bit quicker through this because I do know we've got about, just a little
Oh, we're
over
running.
15 minutes to go, and
Yeah,
we wanted to make sure to cover a different things. So I'm going to go fairly quickly through this one, just as like a quick example. Um, but it should be pretty easy to kind of follow up, and we can follow up on different questions and look to do a demo posting somewhere or instructions posting on a kind of YouTube video or something like that, and share it on the Rocketry forum.
yeah.
Um, but if I want start out with my example simple rocket again, and I want to do booster pods. So I can add boosters here by selecting the body tube, and we can see kind of like where the boosters are going to come on. So we've got a booster set, and this is basically just defining how I want the boosters overall, as they're typically strap-on boosters that would occur. So think of like your Falcon Heavy type design or something to that effect. Um, we can talk about where we might want ejection charges to be separating. Like, do we want to do with the current stage? Do we want to add motor burnout, et cetera, et cetera? In this case, I'm going to say never, just for this particular scenario. I'm going to want 3 boosters because that's how many I want around um, the actual rocket, and I want to offset at an angle of 60 degrees so that we can see kind of, if I were looking at the back view, you can see again um, these little indicators. I don't know if you can see them real well on this zoomed view, but if I zoomed in, you can see this is where the boosters are going to strap onto the actual body tube here. And so set that's actually added, but again, it's just, this is a logical thing that we want to do. It's a construct or a subassembly if you want to think of it from that perspective. I'm going to go ahead and add my BT5. I'm going to make it 2 inches long. And so remember earlier, I didn't see that pop up of the components that I was looking for because I've added it to my presets that I want to be able to select here. And so now I've got it there. And if I took a look at it in 3D finish view, I can see that I've got my pods on at this point in time. I do want to say that these are a motor mount in this particular case. So if I say that it is a motor mount, that allows me to put the additional motors in that I'm interested in. And I can make different configurations from that perspective. And then say I want a nose cone. Again, we've got our giant nose cone that's kind of, but if I go in here and pick the previous nose cone, that same BNC5AX, and I just drag it up here, then I can see here I have my boosters. And then I can go in here and I can,
Billy, I'm
yep.
not quite sure what's happening here, but we are not seeing any movement on the screen. Uh,
Oh, you're not, okay,
it just stopped when you were
okay,
picking the booster set configuration and has not moved since.
okay.
Try
So,
resharing and see what happens.
okay. Sharing, I'm gonna reshare. How's that look?
Yes, that shows everything you've done since it
Okay.
froze up before, and it's moving now.
Okay. Okay. And so what I had done before, what I had done is I had added my body tubes to the booster set. I have added the nose cone, so you in front, um, and I've also marked from here. I don't remember if I got to show you that I wanted to make sure that I marked this was a motor mount. So I marked that from the body tube, saying that I could do that. So that when I come over and want to actually configure a flight tube, I can see that my motor mount is the body tubes. And I'm going to rename that so that you can see what that actually looks like and just call it the pod boosters. But then it becomes quite clear that when you jump into this motor configuration, you can see these are the pod boosters that I'm putting rockets for and actually making a selection. So if I did if I wanted to add motors, which popped up over there, but I could add the A10 motor if I wanted to on this particular one and shove those into all the boosters. And you can see from there, we can go and run a flight simulation. I have it to where it's set up to run them automatically when I modify them. So you can see it's going to be one heck of a flight. Obviously, you want to actually look in more depth at the simulations to see if it's actually really going to work. But we'll talk about that some more in a bit. So I'm going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to pass it back off to Joe here. So, well, actually, I'm going to share my window again.
Yeah,
So I think you were going to talk to us a little bit about the drag hack. This is something that we've seen a bit, Joe.
yeah. Um, there's a problem with trying to simulate short stubby rockets, which is that the stability calculations aren't accurate. So here is a little one I came up with, and if you look at it, well, let's go back to
Sorry.
the.
Yeah.
If you look at it, you'll see that the simulation is showing the center of pressure, that's the red dot, ahead of the center of gravity, and that is saying that that rocket is not going to fly. Uh, sure looks like it ought to fly, and a lot of people have flown rockets that look a lot like that. Uh, okay, now we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
Um, what's happening and why these actually work is that the base drag at the end of the body tube is contributing substantially to the stability. And Bruce Levinson, back in 2005, if I remember right, in Apogee Pica Flight Flight Newsletter number 154, analyzed that a little bit and concluded that it's possible to incorporate base drag instability by pretending you've got a nose cone back there. So let me see. Um, let me see if I can. Whoops.
You're going to share your
Yeah,
screen, right?
share my screen
Okay.
and let me just grab a rocket here that I have created for the sole purpose of this demonstration. And of course, this is the rocket you saw in that previous slide. Um, what we can do to simulate the base drag is come down past the body tube and add a nose cone. Make the nose cone conical, make it the same diameter as the body tube, and give it a length of pi times the length of the body tube, which is roughly 6.1 inches. And we do that, and it has changed the estimate of where the center of pressure is, which was our goal. Unfortunately, of course, body tubes have, or nose cones have weight, so it also moved the center of gravity. Well, let's go ahead and tell it that the mass of that nose cone is 0. We do that, and the center of gravity is back where it was before. Center of pressure is now someplace telling us we've probably got a stable rocket. Um, in the past, you would have to calculate stability like this, but you've got this nose cone hanging off the back, screwing up your drag calculations, and so you have to take it off again to try to do a flight simulation. Well, you do that and it's not stable. What we can do now is we can also override the drag coefficient. So our stability calculations are saying there's a nose cone back there, and our stability is showing us as being a much more stable rocket. And but when we simulate it, it's not affecting the drag, and so we get a good simulation as well. We do get a warning down in the corner here. We do get a warning here that that there's an abrupt change in a discontinuity in the body radius, which of course there is. Um, so OpenRocket is telling us, I don't think this is right. Again, this is an example where you have to use your judgment because you know that what you're doing is deliberately fooling OpenRocket, and that's working just fine. Something else to mention on this. Whoops, I don't want to do that. Something else to mention on this. You notice I've got the stability displayed as a percentage. There's a standard rule of thumb that your center of gravity should be like 1 caliber ahead of your center of pressure. That's not accurate for really long rockets where you want a bigger gap than that, or short stubby rockets like this one. So another way we can display it, which we're doing here, and which I think is generally more accurate, is as a percentage of the length of the rocket. And we're showing 8.97%, which is all the way from the tip of the nose cone to the base of our base drag nose cone. So we've got a good stable rocket here.
Yeah.
Uh, that's a choice you can make in your preferences, in the units, stability, these different options for showing how stable the rocket is.
Okay.
Okay,
I think we got to
turn
keep
it back
moving
over to you.
along
Yes.
here. Yeah. So I think there's a couple slides we're just going to skim over in order to make this fit within the time that we've got.
Yeah.
However, we do want to touch on this slide for sure. And this is about accurate simulations and overrides and actually like how do you get accuracy? And I love how Joe phrases this is garbage in, garbage out isn't just a cliche. Like you need to make sure that all of the stuff that you're putting into the rocket is actually accurate in order to get the best simulation. So check the dimensions that you have, check the materials, what's the surface roughness that you have. And as part of this release, there's a whole new variety of surface roughness um, labels and things like that to help make it easier for and more consistent with some other um, rocketry software products out there so that there's some consistency across the space and it's a little bit more clear as to when certain ones apply. Um, Go ahead, Joe.
A- And I'll just mention that one of the places where we see people making the biggest mistakes in their simulations is by not checking surface roughness. And if you tell the simulation that your surface roughness is like sandpaper, you will get a very low altitude. So yeah, let's skip the rest of this one.
Yep. And then you open up preferences. I should have touched on that earlier. We should have touched on it earlier, but there is an option for where user-defined motor files are there. We have some instructions, and we might need to update them in the wiki, but we'll go ahead and update those as far as like where you can find the user-defined motor files and how to do that. There was some work that went in this particular release where there was an interesting bug that was like, oh, we're actually telling you the wrong location where these files are. So there's been some bug fixes to help you with that, but also some information like we've updated the database. It's more, it's synced with thrust curve. We pull those in. So you shouldn't need it as an average user, but for those that are doing their own experimental motors or getting things that aren't yet approved, that aren't on the thrust curve website, then, uh, and they haven't been certified motors, you may need to add your own. And there's ways of doing that. So anything that, Joe?
I don't think so. Oh,
Okay.
actually, I should mention one thing is that OpenRocket has gotten much pickier about uh, not allowing motor files that have errors in them.
Right.
And a lot of the people who used to say OpenRocket's okay, but it crashes a lot, are now saying OpenRocket is a lot more stable, but how come it won't allow any of my motors? And what was happening was it was crashing when it hit errors in the thrust curve.
Yep.
So
I know you personally have done a lot of work, Joe, and actually kind of cleaning that up. So thank you for that. So now your open rocket won't crash, but you will see errors, and it will complain to you about the types of thrust curves that you have for your motors. So okay, um, there are a lot of different common issues with simulations, and what you should do is actually look really hard. So if you see ridiculously high altitude or high speed deployments, if you should try and use some of your common sense as you've built experience actually building this. There's some things that you begin to learn. Some things are harder when you start pushing the boundaries of different pieces. And what we can say about this is really, really look closely at the data. There's a ton of different charts and different plots and different ways of adding custom y-axis values or different things like that that will tell you is it weathercocking? Is it is it experiencing this is one thing that Joe and I were going over yesterday. Does it have extreme force when actually you're deploying your recovery systems? I thought that was really interesting that you were showing me there, Joe. So really take a look at how to different pieces a bit more, like the different graphs and the different pieces of data that it's actually telling you from the simulations. Um, okay. So you want to touch on a couple of these things of looking ahead, looking forward of where we want to go?
sure. Um, let's see. Lots and lots and lots of stuff we want to do in the future. Number one, so important we don't even want to put it on the list here, is we intend to have a faster release cadence, one or two releases a year. Uh, we want to find out how good we really are at supersonic flight. There is a lot of code doing that, and we want to improve it. We want to incorporate the base drag in the stability calculation so we don't need the hack. We want to do more import output enhancements. We really want to be able to export a component as an STL file so you can slice it and run on a 3D printer. Uh, we want to do ring fins. Um, what else? Those are probably the most important ones from the standpoint of the users.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that there's some safety enhancements that we want to look at to help make sure that people are like in flying. And we already collect this information to users so they can make more sense of some of the errors and the warnings and the graphs and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
um, but how can you help? It is a community. We've been talking about that for a while, and there's a variety of ways for people. Just during this talk, we've already seen a couple of questions that have come in around, I've done this bit of code in the past. How can I get it into OpenRocket, or how can I actually add this particular part, or help in different ways? And so the ways that you can do that, there's testing. Many of you from the Rocketry Forum have been part of the beta testing. Thank you for that. You can help contribute to documentation, raising GitHub issues, contributing code. There's financial contributions, and we've had several financial contributors that have helped us cover the cost of certificates and things to that effect. So thank you to everyone who's actually helped. There's all kinds of ways of getting involved. If you don't know how, just reach out. We're on the Rocketry Forum. We're on Slack. You can find us on GitHub. You can find us in the mailing list. There's all kinds of ways to find us. Ask and let us know. So
And I just realized something missing here is there's an active Facebook group also
there,
that that
yes, we
that
forgot
several
that.
of us monitor.
Yep. Okay, and technically we're out of time, and we're going to jump over here and just basically, when you do run into a problem, help you. Give us as much as you possibly can to help us debug different pieces. So include your ORK file, pictures, stack dumps, whatever you get that comes in there. Think of all of the stuff that you can actually do to help us. If you see a crash, get all the text that's in that little crash box and just send it to us. If you best chance is always to send us the ORK so that we can open it up and recreate your scenario itself. So, okay. And then thank you to all the contributors. There's over 47 people who've made code contributions. There's a number of you who've been beta testers. There's 28 financial contributors, and there's just so many other ways that you guys help each other and help us. And so just thank you for everything that you guys do. So, Joe, anything to add on that?
Um, and I'll just mention, even if you're not a beta tester, if you're a user, you're a tester. Thank you.
That's right. Yeah. Thank
If
you.
if you if you tell us when things break, you're a tester. So thank you. We want to hear.
Yes. Yes. Whoever's the easiest for you, we're in touch. So thank you. Okay. Good.
And again, a shout out to EJ Technologies and their Install4j, who are letting us use their installer for free because we're a nonprofit open source organization.
Okay. All right. I think we got most of the questions answered. There's a couple here. So there was one question around challenges with OS. I think the best way to actually help with that is just ping us on one of these particular forums that we were talking about, and we can kind of help with your personal situation. And, I talked about can we talk a little bit more about the coefficient to drag, and we'd love to have that conversation, but I think we're out of time here, so let's have it in the hallway chat.
Yeah. And Severio, you're welcome.
Yes.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
And